Oliver Sacks was a very eminent neurologist and researcher of the brain. And he had a patient that he called Dr. P, who I believe was in his maybe 50s. And Dr. P had started to develop strange inability to recognize things. And he went to an ophthalmologist and was sent to a neurologist because of the way it was expressing itself. And so he was sent to Oliver Sacks. And Oliver Sacks noticed some peculiar things about Dr. P. Dr. P could no longer recognize the things in his life that were constantly moving and changing. So, for instance, when he was sitting in Oliver Sacks's office and he was about to leave, he needed to get his hat. And he couldn't figure out what his hat was. And he thought that his hat was his wife's head. And so he put both hands on his wife's head as though he was picking up his hat. And this was a normal thing in his experience. He couldn't make sense of visual cues. It's called visual agnosia. Similar to aphasia, where you can't speak, visual agnosia is the inability to make sense of visual cues, except for particular forms of visual cue. And I won't get into the details of that. But what I found interesting is that Dr. P was a singer, he was a music teacher, and he was also a painter. All his life, he had been a painter, and he would paint, I think, still lifes. And in the progression of his disease, his still lifes, which were very realistic, shifted from being realistic to being very abstract, like Picasso level abstract. And it was because his brain and his memory, his visual memory, could no longer make sense of the images in front of him. And so they became more and more abstract. When shown pictures, he could recognize shapes, geometrical forms, but he couldn't recognize images of people unless they had a very specific cue on their face, like a mole or something like that. So what this made me think of is the idea of imagination in mediumship and the non-linear communication of spirit. So first and foremost, mediumship is many things, and many people have many different opinions about what it is and how it works and where it's coming from. But one thing that is true is that, for sure, across the board, is that most of the time, spirit communication is nonlinear. It's not in language. It's not in narrative. Most of the time, it comes through in image and in symbol. And the spiritual energies around us that we communicate with use our own personal life experience and our imagination to send information. So for instance, whenever I'm bringing through a grandmother for somebody, when I'm aware of a grandmother energy that is present, I will often see a particular aunt of mine who passed a few years ago when it comes to personality of the energy that's coming through. So if an energy has a particular personality trait, this aunt of mine will come to me and I will know that that is what spirit is trying to use in my personal experience to give information about them. And I think that it's really important as mediums, like Dr. P, except by choice and not by force, to be able to step outside of the literal, of the things that we have learned, of the life experiences that we've had, yes, but also the educational experiences we've had, so that we can just be present with the void around us and allow spirit to connect with the aspects of our lives and our imagination that will help communicate information to the sitter. And it just makes me think of the idea that a lot of times humans get locked into this knowledge that we gain throughout our lives because we need to for survival, and particularly what we learn through the educational system, that we know more because of what we've learned in school, and so we get locked into that knowledge. If you look at particular professions, doctors, lawyers, sorry, no offense to you, but Those people tend to get very locked into what they know to be true from what they've learned and have an inability to step outside of it, which is very limiting. And it's particularly limiting as a medium to be locked into knowledge, so that all of the abstract aspects of who we are aren't allowed to expand and become a part of the message, which is often the only way that spirit can communicate with us. So I think it's just an interesting point I'm trying to make, how to expand our ability to let go of those things we lock in for our survival, so that abstractions can be a part of readings. Meditation, deep breathing, working with our emotions in the day-to-day life so that we learn how to breathe when challenge arises, so that breath then plays a big role in meditation and mediumship. All of these practices help us to be able to be fully present and allow abstractions to be a part of our readings, which is so important, and allows us to be able to interpret abstractions rather than being confused by them or being unable to even share them because they don't make sense to us.